Something is following Jannik Sinner around Wimbledon this week, and you will not find it anywhere in the scoreline. He is winning, he is the defending champion, the #1 player in the world, the man everyone else is chasing. And yet a year ago, on this exact court, one of his own rivals summed up how half the locker room really feels about him using a single character. No sentence, no explanation, just one mark. What it means, and why it will not leave him alone, is the part nobody wants to say out loud. Let's get into it. Because here is the thing about this title defense. It has not been smooth. In the first round he was dragged to 5 sets by a man ranked 50th in the world, slipping twice on the fresh grass, looking nothing like the machine that has dominated the sport. He needed 2 nervy tiebreaks to get past his second opponent. Even in a straight sets win in the 4th round, he was broken trying to serve it out, and sprayed unforced errors he would normally never miss. He is winning, he is into the second week, he is chasing the honor of becoming only the 10th man in the Open era to successfully defend a Wimbledon crown. And if the seedings hold, he is on a collision course with Novak Djokovic in the semi-finals, which would be a storyline all its own. But every wobble, every shaky service game, quietly reopens a conversation the tennis world has been having about him for a year and a half. And it is not really about his forehand. Sinner arrived at Wimbledon this year without playing a single grass court warm-up event, a habit he has leaned into as he has climbed to the top. After his shock early exit at the French Open in late May, he stepped away entirely, spending time back in Italy, reportedly including for health tests, before turning up in London to find his footing on the grass. So he walked onto center court rusty, undermatched, and still expected to win, and he has, if unconvincingly. For most defending champions, that story would be a simple one about ring rust. For Sinner, because of everything that trails him, nothing is ever quite that simple. The moment he looks vulnerable, the old questions come straight back to the surface. To understand why, you have to go back to March of 2024. Sinner failed a drug test. Then, 8 days later, he failed a second one. Both came back positive for clostebol, a banned anabolic steroid. The amounts were microscopic, less than a billionth of a gram, but the rulebook does not grade on quantity. Positive is positive. He was provisionally suspended, which should have been the moment the entire sport found out. It was not. Because Sinner did something almost no other player has ever pulled off. He appealed the suspension, and within 10 days it quietly disappeared. No announcement, no headline. The public had no idea any of it had happened. Sit with what that meant in practice. All through the spring and summer of 2024, while the rest of the tour competed with zero knowledge of any of this, Sinner kept playing, and kept winning. He captured the US Open in September, lifting a Grand Slam trophy in New York, while carrying 2 failed drug tests that not one of his rivals knew existed. The news did not break until August, and by then an independent tribunal had already ruled he bore no fault. The explanation accepted was that the steroid had entered his body through his physiotherapist, who had used an over-the-counter spray on a cut on his own hand before giving Sinner a bare-handed massage. He fired the physiotherapist. He fired the trainer who bought the spray. And for a moment it seemed finished. It was not, because the World Anti-Doping Agency refused to accept the no-fault verdict. They appealed and publicly floated a ban of 1 to 2 years. Then, rather than fight it out at a hearing, Sinner's camp and WADA negotiated a private settlement. What they landed on in February of 2025 is the detail that lit the fuse. 3 months, a ban engineered to slot perfectly into a window where Sinner would not miss a single major. He returned in time for the Italian Open, then the French, then Wimbledon, where he won the title. No trophies surrendered, no prize money returned, no Grand Slam skipped. That was the moment the whispers became a revolt. Nick Kyrgios led it. He wrote, flatly, that fairness in tennis does not exist. He pointed to the gulf between the 1 to 2 year ban WADA had brandished and the 3 months Sinner's lawyers ultimately delivered, with nothing of value lost. He called it a sad day for the sport, and when Sinner lifted the Wimbledon trophy, Kyrgios did not offer congratulations. He posted that asterisk, but he was not alone, which is exactly what made it more than one man with a grudge. Denis Shapovalov reduced the whole affair to 4 words, different rules for different players. Lucas Pouya, a former top 10 player, echoed it. Jessica Pegula said the so-called process did not even resemble a process, that the authorities seemed to invent their ruling as they went and simply called it fair. British player Liam Brodie pointed out how carefully the timing had been arranged to dent Sinner's career as little as possible. Even Serena Williams, from retirement, landed a line like a punch, saying that if she had done what Sinner did she would have gotten 20 years and been stripped of her Grand Slams. Nobody laughed, because everybody understood she was only half joking. Quick one for you before we go further, because I genuinely want to know where you stand. If you think this was blown out of proportion, and Sinner did nothing wrong, drop the word innocent below. If you think his punishment looked nothing like what any ordinary player gets, type 2 tier. I read every single comment, and if these are the stories you come here for, the subscribe button is right there. Then came the voice that carried the most weight. Novak Djokovic, 24 majors, the most powerful man in the game, and, as it happens, the man Sinner may have to beat in the semi-finals here at Wimbledon, if both keep winning. Djokovic was careful. He did not call Sinner a cheat. He went out of his way to say Sinner is innocent, unless proven otherwise. But what he said cut deeper than any accusation. He said the majority of players he had spoken to, over months, did not believe the process was fair. He said it appears a top player with the best lawyers can practically shape his own outcome. He used the word that became the headline everywhere, favoritism. And he described the whole affair as a cloud that would hang over Sinner for years, comparing it to a shadow he felt had trailed his own career. He was not the last legend to weigh in either. Tim Henman, a former world number 4, who now sits on the board that runs Wimbledon, said the timing and length of the ban felt a little too convenient and had left a sour taste. Months later, sitting alongside Kyrgios before an exhibition, Aryna Sabalenka circled back to the same core point. Every player, big name or small, has to be treated exactly the same, and right now they simply are not. But strip away the personalities, and the real grievance was never about Sinner the man. Almost everyone who spoke up made a point of saying they believed his explanation. The anger was about comparison, and the comparisons were brutal. Chile's Nicolas Jarry lost 11 months over a contaminated supplement he never knowingly took. Sweden's Mikael Ymer got 18. Simona Halep, a two-time major champion, watched years of her career vanish fighting her case. Tara Moore, ranked far lower, spent a year and a half in limbo clearing her name. None of them had what Sinner had. The resources, the scientists, the lawyers, the ability to produce a fast, airtight explanation. When they could not prove the source within days, the system treated them as guilty. Sinner could, and it treated him as unlucky. Same rulebook, opposite lives. The sharpest comparison came from outside tennis entirely. A Spanish figure skater named Laura Barquero tested positive for the very same drug, clostebol, and was handed a 6-year ban. 6 years for her, 3 months for Sinner, identical substance. When Spanish media forced the question, the authorities explained the gap came down to intent. They were not convinced by her account of how it entered her system, and they were convinced by his. It may be a legitimate distinction on paper, but try selling 6 years against 3 months to a locker room that already suspects the scales are tilted, and you understand why the explanation never landed. In fairness to Sinner, the authorities have a real answer. WADA's own counsel called the case a million miles from real doping. The rules do draw a hard line between intentional and unintentional violations, and that line is precisely what separated Sinner's 3 months from someone else's 2 years. The agencies insist there was no special treatment, only better evidence. On the letter of the law, they may be entirely right, but elite sport does not run on the letter of the law. It runs on what players believe when they look at each other across the locker room. And what they believed was that the biggest name in the game got the smallest possible penalty at the most convenient possible moment. One concrete thing did come out of the wreckage. The Players Association Djokovic helped create launched a program offering free legal support to any player facing doping charges, built so that the next Jarry or the next Tara Moore is not buried simply because they cannot afford the defense a world number 1 can buy. That is the quiet legacy of this whole saga, not a verdict that satisfied anyone. A reform born entirely out of resentment. So when players reveal their real opinion of Jannik Sinner, this is what it actually sounds like. It is not hatred. It is not even a belief that he cheated on purpose. It is a stubborn conviction that he was handed a version of justice no ordinary player would ever be offered, and that no amount of winning will make it disappear. And that is what makes this current Wimbledon so revealing. He is back on the exact court where the asterisk was born, defending the exact title he won under the cloud, and the doubt has traveled with him every step of the way. Which brings us back to that single character, one asterisk, posted after a final, saying everything a paragraph could not. That is the trap Sinner lives inside. Every trophy is supposed to be the answer, and instead becomes the question all over again. Adored by the crowds, quietly doubted by his peers, dragging behind him a shadow that, in one rival's words, is going to follow him whether he earned it or not. He may well lift this Wimbledon trophy again in a week's time, and even then, someone, somewhere, will reach for that asterisk before the champagne is dry. Winning was never going to erase it, it only makes people reach for it faster. If this one gave you something to chew on, hit that like button before you move on. It is the single biggest signal that tells YouTube to put these stories in front of other tennis fans who would never find them otherwise. And if you want the ones that dig past the headline instead of shouting it, subscribe. There is plenty more on the way.